We have come together virtually in Tallinn, Estonia, from across the globe for this, the third Global Forum of Education and Skills 2030. We have focused on equality, equity, and inclusion, how these concepts overlap, and how they differ, and how they enhance learning and well-being across the board. Indeed, equity is the topic of our times, as Andreas announced at the start of the forum. And as one delves into equity, one inevitably arrives at inclusion. Accessing knowledge about equity is an important place to start. You have launched the Adapting Curriculum to Bridge Equity Gaps report, an important milestone. The Estonian Minister of Education and Research welcomed us. Her speech was remarkable, both for what it contained and what it did not contain. Despite being Europe's top performer on PISA science, maths, and reading tests, no mention was made of this. Instead, the minister focused on speaking of the importance of aligning social and education policy. All Estonian students receive a hot meal every school day. During the pandemic, a food package. All have access to free extracurricular activities. She said, "We seek to engage, not to impose. Co-agency is a core driver of constructive and sustainable change." In other words, education is something that happens in cooperation. So the minister focused on equity, well-being, and stakeholder engagement. She stated that the main purpose of assessment is to support learning. Learning by the entire education system, and when speaking of students, learning that supports their holistic development. She provided concrete examples. Learning to learn, communication and self-management tests, digital competence tests, scientific, mathematical, and linguistic literacy tests. These are mark-free and feedback-laden, not part of summative assessment. There are also student, teacher, and parent surveys aimed at giving these groups a voice and generating data needed for improving the system. On one school tour in Estonia, we met 3 students who embody some of the cooperation and co-agency ethos that the Estonian minister spoke of. These are IT students, no experience required, just needing to be curious, engaged, and future-oriented. The students said, "We learn and then teach students and teachers in our school, in other schools, internationally." The same phenomenon of students helping students and teachers was reported even in primary schools across the forum. In Estonia, this work has been helped by focusing over 15 years on curriculum, assessment, accountability systems, professional development, teacher education, finance, textbooks, and alignment thereof. Alignment of systems is another key theme of this forum. But these are extraordinary times. We find ourselves less in this situation and more in this situation. A situation that works well for some, less well for others, and not at all for still others. Moreover, as people have worked during the pandemic to overcome learning losses, there has been a focus on the cognitive, creating pressure for all. It has also been more challenging to support the social, emotional, and physical development of students. You repeat time and time again of the need to focus on the holistic development of students. Your Adapting Curriculum to Bridge Equity Gaps report speaks of 4 types of commonly used curricula: digital, personalized, cross-curricular and competency-based, flexible. They all have numerous positive aspects to them, but they also include risks, specifically in reference to equity and inclusion. Risks are not abstract. They have a profound impact on people. Student Maxime described the profound impact not only on his life, but also his mother's life, who had to fight for the right to an education, the impact on the teachers and leaders in the 5 schools from which he was excluded, all because people could not see his real needs nor know how to help or work with him. Maxime managed to finally overcome these obstacles with the help of teachers at a new innovative school, and now is in university and teaching us through his story. 5 lessons learnt from unintended consequences in reference to equity and inclusion were discussed. Universal design, which can be used to design curricula and learning, suggests that we look at the why, the what, and how of learning. With the how, we could use a greater diversity of learning materials. When it comes to the what, we can offer students multiple ways of demonstrating their learning. The risk is approaching the what and the how before the why, or thinking of why without thinking of all students and misinterpreting what is engaging. Under the why, we can try to make learning more engaging for all by connecting from the student's perspective to my present. We had an example of a student who took a picture of a dangerous site that went viral in the community and the local government reacting by removing the danger. So we can connect from the student's perspective also to my interests and my future. Yet time and time again, you point out that learning is not an island unto itself. It occurs in combination with the complex concepts of teaching, curricula, and assessment. With a persistent focus on the why of learning. This takes us to assessment. Assessment supporting whole person development. High-stakes exams on their own are likely to diminish whole person development. By valuing the learning processes, effort, students' work through e-portfolios, community work, native language knowledge, community experience, and so forth, we can help value the whole person and better foster holistic development. A key message is that what gets measured gets treasured. It should also help the whole system to learn and improve. I come back to this image. Assessment is part of a larger ecosystem. It is certainly more complex than this image shows, and we always need to keep in mind the why behind both learning and assessment. Public-private relationships were signaled as including opportunities, for example, in developing digital solutions, but also including risks, such as dependency, more money please, or contributing to a consumer mindset in education. Do as you're told by the consumer. Outsourcing education to the private sector. How do we then look out for individual students and society's interests? Avoiding stigmatization. Cross-curricular content and competency-based and personalized curricula are seen by some as not being concepts-based, not being based on disciplinary knowledge, not fostering high levels of literacy or numeracy, when they in fact do exactly that. Biases come into play. By showing the public that these are high expectations curricula, biases can be reduced. It helps for people to see that personalization goes hand in hand with collaboration, not isolation. The future needs these competencies. You also stress that we should not underestimate the resources required to support equitable and inclusive education. It's important to keep in mind the economic capital, the human capital, social capital, and natural capital required. Some equity gaps are highly visible, like a shortage of computers, but we must listen to see the non-observable equity gaps such as special needs, home environment, and mental health issues. The cost of inaction is too great on a personal and systems level. It is worth keeping in mind that Pasi Sahlberg reminds us that high levels of equity tend to correlate with the delivery of high-quality education in general, whilst a decline in equity of outcomes goes hand in hand with a decline in the quality of education. And during the pandemic, high equity education systems have shown themselves to be more flexible. A core message resonating from this forum is that stakeholders, students, teachers, mothers, fathers, school leaders, all need to collaborate. Collaboration is the only viable way forward. That requires deep listening and seeing. Maxime offered an example when time was set aside every Wednesday afternoon in his school to listen to students, to dialogue and find the gaps and deal with them. We need to work together to see diversity, to look at inequity through diverse dimensions: immigration, gender, indigenous people, giftedness. These dimensions intersect to produce inequities that are compounded by the context, such as socioeconomic need, geography, and natural disasters. We also need to support diverse paths, access better data, avoid overprotection, letting students learn through mistakes. We need to co-create learning. Everyone is a learner, not just students, but teachers, parents, policymakers, school leaders, and so on. We need to build our capacity to adapt, distinguish fact from opinion, and challenge our thinking and attitudes. On the first day, our student chair said, investments into teacher and parent equity and inclusion are an investment into student equity and inclusion. On the second day, working in groups, you summarize key points as, at times, everyone can be vulnerable. The pandemic has shown that all students are vulnerable. Systems are making people vulnerable. Students need to be seen for who they are, feeling their contribution matters. Co-creation of assessment is needed, as is co-creation of evidence of learning. Students helping students. Cooperation with teachers, researchers, and students is also seen as key. You've been working to create a teaching compass that supports teacher well-being, agency, and competency building. The teaching compass also aims to support students in using the learning compass. Both the teaching and learning compasses invite co-agency. It means sharing power and responsibility, and in fact, new roles and responsibilities for all. We will need to learn from mistakes, trust one another, show generosity towards one another, and be courageous. The solution lies in the quality of our relationships. As Lynn said, it is about the pedagogy of relationships. I leave you with an image of some of the concrete outputs of your work, and with an image from the report on bridging equity gaps and a final thought. We all need to flourish so the world can flourish. Thank you. Aita.